When former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland resigned due to her opposition to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's fiscal policy, it sent shockwaves through Parliament Hill. Now, she wants her boss's job. But who was Chrystia Freeland before her meteoric rise in Canadian politics? Catherine Tsalikis is the author of a new biography. It's called Chrystia, From Peace Valley to Parliament Hill, and she joins us now for more. It's great to meet you and have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve.
You can write about anybody. Why Chrystia Freeland?
I think there's two main answers to this. The first is that there's just not that many women here in Canada who reach the heights that she does in politics. I was on maternity leave in 2020. In the summer, it was the pandemic. Chrystia Freeland was appointed our first ever female finance minister. I could barely get myself out the door, and I considered it a win if I could take my baby to the park. And there she was, mother of three, not only finance minister, but the deputy prime minister, number 2 to Justin Trudeau. So I wanted to know how she did it. The second reason is that we also don't have many stories about Canadian women in public life.
True.
When I first started thinking about doing this, I tried to find examples in the literature of things that I could kind of emulate and to inspire me, and I could not find a biography of a female Canadian politician written by a female Canadian journalist.
Right.
I just couldn't. So I thought, in a way, this could be how I could contribute to that canon.
Is this an authorized or unauthorized biography?
This is unauthorized, which I've been saying makes it sound a lot more salacious than it actually is. All it means, of course, is that the subject had no editorial input or control over the book. I didn't speak with her. I did ask at the beginning.
I went to your book launch. Yeah. You tried very hard to get her to participate, and for whatever reason, they didn't see fit to give you an interview at the end of the day. Are you disappointed by that?
In the end, I think it probably worked out for the best. She knows a lot of journalists. So in the course of interviewing people for this book, I spoke with a lot of journalists, and they said, the second you speak with her, it becomes a bit of a different book. So you want to be able to keep a bit of arm's length distance, a little bit of objectivity, and I think that was good. I was able to speak with her sister, a couple of her aunts, her best friends. So I feel like I got close, but this way I was able to kind of paint a portrait the way other people see her, and I was happy with how
gotcha.
it went.
As the title suggests, her life started in Peace River, Alberta in 1968. What was her childhood like?
She describes it as magical. So she was born in she was raised on a farm in Peace River. Her earliest memory was, driving with her dad on a combine, and she rode horses. It was quite wonderful. I think that instilled in her a real love of Canada. Being up there, I got to visit there. It is just stunning, gorgeous, expansive. So I think that that identity is really rooted deep in her. But her parents divorced when she was 8, so she moved with her mother and her sister to Edmonton. And there, she was raised in this Ukrainian emigre community. So her maternal grandparents had come over after the Second World War, settled in Edmonton. And there, she was thrown into these conversations about geopolitics, the future of the Soviet Union. Would Ukraine ever gain its independence? And so I think that kind of gave her this one eye on the outside world.
I'm going to pick up on that again in a second, but I want to go back to something that I learned about in your book, didn't know beforehand. She was born Christina Alexandra Freeland, but as a teenager, she decided to change her name to Chrystia. How come?
Yeah, that's right. So her primary school, her elementary school teachers know her as Christine. It was as an homage to her Ukrainian heritage. She visited for the first time when she was 12 with her mom, her aunt, and her sister. And this was still when Ukraine was behind the Iron Curtain, so it was quite an experience, realizing what it means to live in an authoritarian regime. But so she came back, and she felt like she didn't want to gloss over, I think, that identity. It was very much a part of her. Her aunt was also named Chrystia and went through the same thing, and she talked it over with her aunt, who told her, in Canada, they tried to assimilate me. They tried to see me, they don't try not to make me as other, but I am other, and so that's why I wanted to embrace that, and that's what Chrystia felt as well. So she changed it.
The whole grandfather thing has been a bit of a controversy since she got into public life. Do you want to first of all say what it is and then tell us how she handled it?
So her maternal grandfather during the Second World War fled he was in Western Ukraine, but as the Red Army, the Russians were approaching, he decided to take his chances with the Germans, with the Nazis, because he saw them as friendlier to the goal of independent Ukraine, which is what he always wanted. So he went to Poland, to Krakow, and he worked for a paper there that was owned by the Nazi government and controlled by them. So it was very anti-Semitic, filled with hate-filled propaganda, but it was also pro-Ukrainian, so it kind of fit his intellectual leanings. And it meant that he was insulated from a lot of the harsh totalitarian rule that others in the city, the country, and across Europe were faced with. So that came out, the fact that her grandfather worked for this newspaper while Chrystia Freeland was foreign minister. And I think the way in which she addressed it, she didn't come out and say, it was a nuanced time. We have to kind of look at it through the lens of the time.
She said it was Soviet attempts to disinform.
Exactly. So that puzzled me. That was, I think, one of the only things in this, going through her life. She's a journalist. She knows her history. She knows how important it is to tell the truth, evidence, facts. She loves those things. But yeah, so I'm not sure. I think she felt it was personal, perhaps, and her colleague told me there's an information hoardiness about her sometimes. But yeah, it was interesting. I think a lot of her generation would have similar grandparents who went through similar nuanced things. But yeah, I guess that's how she chose to address it.
Her mother ran for the NDP in the 1988 election.
Yeah.
How much of a seed do we think that planted?
You know what? I think she grew up surrounded by politics. Her parents were lawyers, and her dad was, of course, a lawyer and a farmer at the same time. But I don't think it was inevitable that she would have ended up in politics. She, as I have in there, at the age of 3, expressed an interest in becoming a lawyer. And when she got to Harvard, she still wasn't sure what she wanted to do. Maybe academic, maybe a lawyer. She ultimately went into journalism for 2 decades. So I think she thought that was a way that she could, be at the center of things and do something exciting. But I think she saw the change that her mother was able to bring through her activism. So her mother was a trailblazing feminist lawyer. She later helped Ukraine build its like a new constitution, a legal system for Ukraine when it finally got its independence. So, and she saw how her mother had the ability to affect people's lives. And I think that's what she wanted to do when she did enter politics.
And her mother died young.
That's right. She was only 60. This was 2007.
So Chrystia was?
She was in her almost 1968, so 4.
Do the math.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, she was in her 40s, and she was living in New York City. Her mom had given up her career to come and move in with the family so that Chrystia could flourish in hers, which I think allowed her to rise in the way that she did.
There's a very interesting line attributed to her in which she's asked, what do you think was sort of one of your biggest regrets? And she said, I wish I had been a more serious student. Which is an odd thing for somebody who went to Harvard and Oxford to say.
How much more serious can you get?
Well, exactly. So what's that all about?
So I asked friends about this because I was puzzled by that as well. By all accounts, she was a stellar student and made the most of her time at Harvard and Oxford. I think so. At Harvard, she spent a year. Her 3rd academic year was spent on exchange in Kyiv, in Ukraine, behind the Iron Curtain. And that kind of hooked her into that story of Ukraine and its future and where it was going. And so she ended up returning there. She pushed her schooling by a semester. She graduated a semester out of turn. I think what one friend told me was that she didn't graduate summa cum laude. Like, she didn't excel at the top academically. She did well, but I think maybe she was imagining what it would be like to have more time to just sit there and read and think. Chrystia was doing things. She was out there. She was starting her reporting career. So that's my best guess, is that she feels like. And her sister told me, she worked hard in other ways. She made connections at Harvard, right? She met one of her professors, Larry Summers, who would go on to become the chief economist at the World Bank, future U.S. Treasury Secretary. A close friend and mentor to this day. So she definitely worked hard, just perhaps in different, not as bookish ways, perhaps.
Let's talk about her time in journalism, because she had several high-profile positions at the Financial Times, the Globe and Mail, Thomson Reuters. You spoke to many journalists who knew her and worked with her back in the day. What's the verdict on her time in journalism?
She was tenacious. More than a couple of people described her as ruthless, which surprised me. The way she worked to get her story, she was prepared. She was charming. she would lean on, early in her days in Ukraine and Russia, she would lean on this identity as, I'm just a farmer's girl, nothing to see here, and people would open up to her. These very powerful men in Russia, the oligarchs, kind of not realizing that this petite woman was committing to memory everything they were saying, and that the next day it would be on the front page of the Financial Times.
You say petite, so and for people who have not seen her in person,
right? She's 5'2".
You think she's 5'2"?
I've been told she's 5'2". Her mother was like under 5 feet, I think. So.
I was going to say, I've met her, I've stood beside her.
Yes.
I don't think there's a chance she's 5'2".
So I don't know. Maybe in heels, right?
Yeah, maybe in
Which
heels.
she wears rarely. but that's it. She was like a dog with a bone. And I think that, the lessons that she takes from those days is, as an editor, there was 101 decisions that needed to be made, and if she didn't make them, the paper would not go to bed at night. So she drew on those lessons in the pandemic, in other crises in government. Just make the decision, because sometimes not making it is worse. That's one of the lessons I know that she took from those crazy years.
When she wrote that, what turned out to be a very famous book, Plutocrats, and we had her on this program talking about that, there was a 2012 book launch for her, at which she ran into a guy named Justin Trudeau.
Right.
And they had a conversation. First of a few, I gather. How did it go? What happened?
So that initial conversation, went well, but she didn't really think she'd see him again. But unbeknownst to her, at the party was also Katie Telford, who would obviously become Justin Trudeau's campaign manager and then chief of staff. And Katie had a chat with Chrystia's dad, who told her, hey, I think my daughter should run for you guys. And at the time, of course, Liberals were in third place, looking for anyone with credibility, star power to bring into the party. So Katie mentioned this to Justin Trudeau in the car on their way home, or on the way to a different event. And Trudeau looked at her and said, that's a great idea. You should make that a project for us. And so they did. They kept in touch with her. It took, for months it was a no, or maybe in the future. But then in 2013, Bob Rae stepped down as an MP in Toronto Centre, and all of a sudden there was a vacancy. And so it became a bit more real. And it was still a no more than a yes for a few weeks. But he did. Trudeau convinced her. I think he really believed in the fact that she could do it as a mother. He was not concerned with that part of it, and she believed in his values. And so, he got her on board, and it was off to the races.
As he said on the way out, we had a pretty good close partnership for a long time. More to come on that. Let's do an excerpt from the book. Sheldon, you want to bring this up, and I'll read along for those listening on podcast. In politics, she has successfully employed the traits that served her so well in journalism: a seemingly endless supply of energy, a quirky charm, a capacity for coalition building, her dogged determination, a propensity for loyalty. Friends and colleagues describe her as principled but pragmatic, willing to consult widely and hear out the other side before landing on a decision. As a politician, she subscribes to the theory of positive intent, assuming, until proven otherwise, that the actions of her counterparts stem from a place of goodwill. Okay, let's unpack some of this here. Since Mark Carney announced his bid for the Liberal leadership as well, he has captured the lion's share of MP and cabinet minister endorsements. And I wonder how you think she is reacting to the fact that all of those allies who were supposedly so loyal are not with her right now.
Yeah. It's funny, as I saw cabinet minister after cabinet minister endorse Mark Carney, and not the woman with whom they've worked so closely over the past few years, I thought, on a personal level, that's gotta sting, right? If it were me. But she's not easily offended. She puts her head down. There's a story, it's not in the book, but one of her best friends from Harvard told me, when they first met, the friend really loved her. And she thought, hey, this friendship can go somewhere. But Chrystia wore this patchouli scent, and it was just so
She did what?
This patchouli scent, right? This was the 80s, like basically like a perfume, right? It was kind of like potpourri-ish. And the friend was like, I just can't deal with this. I have to tell her. And she was so scared because she really liked her. But she told Chrystia, listen, you have to do something about this scent. And Chrystia was like, oh, you don't like it? No problem. I won't wear it anymore. And so the friend tells me this because, they're still friends to this day. And she says she's not easily offended. She doesn't hold people's decisions against them. And that's how she is able to build these coalitions and reach across aisles and make friends on the other side. I don't think she'll be paying much attention to that, honestly. I know she doesn't, she doesn't read about herself. She doesn't Google herself. I think she's incredibly focused. To her, it's not over until it's over. And she's used to being underestimated, right?
Okay, but this is a unique situation. She is running against Mark Carney. He is godfather to one of her kids. These leadership races invariably are elbows up, very bruising affairs. They are tough on relationships, never mind deep family friendships, as this is. How does that relationship survive this competition? And
so you read the part about her subscribing to this theory of positive intent, right? Mm-hmm. She assumes the other side has goodwill. I will be curious to see how it plays out. So far, there has not been any, personal jazz, mudslinging. Right. She did kind of try and call him out or try and get him to commit to running in the next election. But I wonder if, I'm not sure. Like maybe she could do it. Maybe they can keep it cleaner than we're expecting. They certainly won't be able to do that with Pierre Poilievre. Whoever wins and goes to the general election, that will be, I feel like, a much dirtier affair. But I think she's able to compartmentalize. I don't want to put, words or sentiments into her mouth, but she's very practical, and she has kept friends through, former bosses who who maybe, the situation wasn't great, but is still friends with. She's been through these very stressful NAFTA negotiations under the first Trump presidency, where I spoke with both the negotiators on the U.S. side and the Mexican side, all of whom had glowing things to say. You go through this crazy negotiation, and somehow they call her a friend. They go to her house and they eat together.
She cooked for them.
So yeah, of course, right? She also no. Yeah. So I wonder if maybe there's a way to do it kind of higher. I don't know. I know the climate is so charged right now. And
well, how about I mean, did you see the interview on CBC News Network on the weekend that Rosie Barton did with her?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
that was okay. Let me follow up on that, because that was as tough an interview as I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Never mind Rosie, right? Do with her, maybe with anyone.
That's right.
It was really hard. But here's the point: it's a change election.
Absolutely.
And how does Chrystia Freeland convince Liberals that she represents change, given that she has been, as Justin Trudeau said at his farewell press conference, the closest person he worked with for the last 10 years?
I don't know if you can do it. I don't know. And I know Mark Carney isn't, maybe the outsider that he might want to portray himself as, but he is different. He was not a cabinet minister. She was his right-hand woman from the very beginning. He put her in these successive cabinet positions where she delivered for him.
She had all the big jobs.
So many people told me that Justin Trudeau's policies were really Chrystia Freeland's policies. Like former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, who I spoke with before he passed, said the signature achievement of this government will be coming out of NAFTA with an okay deal, and she was the point person on that. Childcare is a major policy. That was her. It wasn't coming from Trudeau. It was her who pushed that, the idea for that, and she pushed it through. I don't know that you can. I know she's trying, disavowing the carbon tax, the capital gains tax. I'm not sure. And I think when I see the cabinet, her colleagues endorsing Carney, I wonder if it's not personal. I wonder, maybe they truly believe that he is the best chance at change. The Trudeau brand is so toxic right now, and she is just so tied up in
Mind you, her position on this has been, she was on Morning Joe, and she was asked about the carbon tax, and how can you change your mind on the carbon tax? She said, well, I listen to the people. People don't want it, so we're changing our mind.
Yeah.
Can that work?
I think she believes it can. Friends have told me she is incredibly pragmatic. And so if she feels like that's the way the wind is blowing, she will U-turn. And that's fine. And I think that's fine. And I think she's okay with that. Will people see it look at it as a game? I'm not sure if it'll change people's mind. But it's right in that Pierre Poilievre said we're going to be in this carbon tax election next time. And look, what Donald Trump is doing has maybe shifted the priorities.
It's not going to be a carbon tax election.
I don't think so, right?
No, not looking that way now.
Our sovereignty now. What?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think her battle is overcoming that connection that she has with the Prime Minister. I don't know how you separate that record.
Yeah. Catherine, do you know if she's read the book?
I don't know either way. Like I said, she does not look herself up. She doesn't Google herself. So I feel like she has a bit going on right now. So I would be surprised if she had. Maybe in the future. But as far as I know, I actually don't know either. We'll see.
I presume at some point you would love to sit down over a cup of coffee with her and just sort of have a chance to meet her.
You know what? It would be so surreal because I never actually, for the book, sat down with her. I didn't talk with her. I actually have never met her. I interviewed her once over the phone in 2015 for when she was running then. I think it would be quite surreal to see someone whose life I have delved into and thought about for so many years.
I mean, think about it. You know her life better than probably anybody in the world except her.
It's
right?
It's bizarre.
I mean,
I think so because and
you've
that's
talked
why,
to dozens of people who know her.
So that's why I spoke with I think it was around 130 people, and I needed to do that to feel like I had any sort of authority, because everything in there, my voice isn't really in this book. Everything in there is attributed to someone in one way or another. And that's how I felt we could best, I wanted to portray her life for those who are interested and leave the opining up to the reader. You can kind of make your own decision based off the stories in there.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last thing, and that is that she's had a very impressive career so far. And, you know, you and I have both talked to lots of people who think she could do the job were she given the opportunity to do it. I have also talked to lots of people, and I'm sure you saw her campaign kickoff, which did not go well. And many people have observed that despite having been, you know, in the arena for the last 10 years, her communication skills and her ability to kind of convey whatever you're supposed to be able to convey in that job have not improved all that much over 10 years. How does that make sense?
Okay, so I mentioned the way she addressed the grandfather story was puzzling to me. Something else that was puzzling to me is this communication style. So many people I spoke with from her early journalism years through the government years speak of her ability to connect with people and modulate herself to whoever she's speaking with, whether that's, you know, the person on the doorstep talking about immigration.
But that's one-on-one.
That's right, exactly.
Not through a
so
TV lens.
Perhaps that's it. Perhaps it's an inability to project. I think she has a real problem with the way she comes off to the average voter. I have heard her detractors say she comes off as almost condescending, holier than thou.
Schoolmarmish
is the word.
It's a sexist expression, but that's what they say.
Yeah, out of touch. I'm thinking, you know, there was that when she made the comment, you know, everyone needs to tighten their belts a couple of years ago. My family is canceling our Disney Plus subscription. That was meant in an earnest way. She is really frugal. When she first became a cabinet minister, she asked if she could have a futon in her office to save money. She really believes this, but it wasn't taken that way. And so she, you know, the inability to see that it might not be taken in the way that she meant it. I don't know. My only guess is that she just doesn't want to. I know she doesn't pay lip service to things like image, things like her clothes and what she wears. I feel like this is maybe kind of tangential to that. She feels like she has more important things to do, and that is an area where she hasn't put any work into, perhaps. I do notice, I feel like she got a new social media person because there are some really like sassy videos on Instagram. But will that be enough? Yeah, and I think being a politician, she doesn't have, you know, that natural charisma that Trudeau does, Obama. But then again, you know, I spoke with a lot of people who know her and Carney, and a lot of them told me they couldn't see Carney in politics because he's, you know, technocrat, gets easily frustrated with people who he feels are irrational. And they saw her as better able to do the retail politician side of things. I don't know.
Well,
I guess we'll see. Right?
March the 9th, we'll know for sure.
Right, exactly, TBD.
Well, regardless, I hope you get that cup of coffee with her someday. I'm sure you would really appreciate that.
A glass of wine. I feel like that's more fun.
Maybe some wine, okay. The book is called Chrystia, From Peace River to Parliament Hill, and we are delighted that it has brought Catherine Tsalikis into our studio. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you, Steve.